Blaine Keith Milam has spent over 15 years on Texas's death row, his life ticking away in a cell while awaiting his fate. The most chilling detail of his crime? He brutally beat and bit a 13-month-old, Amora Carson, to death during what he claimed was an exorcism, leaving her tiny body covered in 24 human bite marks and multiple fractures. To understand how a man could commit such a horrifying act, we need to rewind to the beginning, where the seeds of his troubled life were sown. Before we begin, please subscribe and tap the bell icon so you don't miss any part of this. Blaine Keith Milam was born on December 17, 1989, in Longview, Texas, a small East Texas town known for its tight-knit communities and rich oil industry roots. Raised in Rusk County, Blaine grew up in a world far from idyllic. His family life was fractured from the start. His father, whose death would later haunt Blaine, was absent for much of his childhood, leaving a void that shaped his emotional landscape. His mother, struggling to raise Blaine and his siblings, faced financial hardship, often moving between low-income housing and trailers. Court records and accounts from those close to him paint a picture of a household stretched thin, where stability was a luxury they couldn't afford. Blaine's childhood was marked by chaos and loss. At age 12, his father's death hit him hard, a turning point that seemed to freeze his emotional growth, according to his mother's testimony during his trial. She described him as never maturing past that age, trapped in a boy's mindset even as his body grew into a man's. School offered no refuge. Blaine dropped out after the 4th grade, barely able to read or write beyond an 8th grade level by adulthood, a fact later highlighted in appeals claiming intellectual disability. Without education or guidance, he drifted, vulnerable to the pull of darker influences. Trouble found Blaine early. As a young teen, he started using methamphetamine, a drug that would weave through his life like a poison thread. Court documents reveal he was on probation for solicitation of aggravated sexual assault of a child under 14 at the time of his arrest for Amora's murder, hinting at a pattern of disturbing behavior that emerged long before 2008. His methamphetamine use wasn't just recreational. It was an escape from a life that felt stacked against him. But what pushed him to such extremes? Was it the drugs, the loss of his father, or something deeper, wired into his psyche from years of neglect? By 18, Blaine was living in a trailer with his girlfriend, Jessica Carson, and her 13-month-old daughter, Amora. He was unemployed, drifting through life with no clear direction. His mother later testified that Blaine had attempted suicide twice after his father's death, a cry for help that went unanswered. These moments, poverty, loss, addiction, and untreated trauma, built a young man teetering on the edge. But how did they lead to the unthinkable violence that would define his legacy? The answer lies in the choices and delusions that would soon consume him, pulling an innocent child into his darkness. In the quiet town of Tatum, Texas, the days leading up to December 2nd, 2008, were marked by a chilling descent into delusion and violence that would end in the brutal death of 13-month-old Amora Carson. Blaine Keith Milam, an 18-year-old with a troubled past, and his fiancée, 18-year-old Jessica Carson, Amora's mother, shared a mobile home on County Road 2125 in Rusk County. Their relationship, which began in January 2008, was intense and volatile, colored by shared drug use and strange beliefs about the supernatural. By late November 2008, Blaine and Jessica were spiraling. Both were using methamphetamine, a drug Blaine had struggled with since his early teens, which fueled their paranoia and distorted their grip on reality. Court records reveal they were obsessed with an Ouija board, believing it allowed them to communicate with their deceased fathers. They told Blaine's mother, Shirley Milam, they could talk to their dads, but soon feared the board was connecting them to bad spirits. In a panic, they threw it away, convinced their trailer was now haunted by evil forces. This wasn't just a fleeting fear, it consumed them. Jessica later told Texas Ranger Kenny Ray she believed the devil was speaking through Blaine, while Blaine insisted a demon had possessed him. Their shared delusions deepened, setting a deadly stage. On December 1st, 2008, the day before the murder, Blaine woke Jessica with a terrifying claim. 13-month-old Amora, a bright-eyed toddler who couldn't yet walk, was possessed by a demon. He pointed to her face, claiming her features were warping, and that she was harming herself under demonic influence. Jessica, swayed by Blaine's intensity and their shared paranoia, began to agree. According to her statement, Blaine told her Amora's evil could send her to hell if they didn't act. The couple, gripped by this delusion, decided an exorcism was the only way to save her soul. But what kind of exorcism could involve a helpless child? That evening, their plan took shape. They didn't have money for a priest, so they decided to take matters into their own hands. Court testimony later revealed they gathered tools: a hammer, a screwdriver, pliers, not for repair, but for a ritual they believed would drive out the demon. The stage was set for a tragedy that would shatter lives and leave investigators haunted for years. On the morning of December 2nd, 2008, inside their cramped mobile home, Blaine and Jessica began their so-called exorcism. Amora, a 23-pound toddler with soft curls and a trusting smile, became the target of their deranged mission. Over several hours, Blaine, with Jessica present, subjected Amora to unimaginable torture. According to the autopsy and trial testimony, Blaine beat her with a hammer, striking her so many times that the medical examiner couldn't pinpoint which blow was fatal. He used a screwdriver and pliers to inflict further pain, fracturing her tiny arm and leg. Most horrifyingly, he bit her at least 24 times, leaving human bite marks from head to toe, some so deep they tore her skin. Forensic dentist Dr. Robert Williams testified that 8 of these marks matched Blaine's teeth, while Jessica could be excluded from all but 1. The child's body told a story of relentless agony: 18 rib fractures, a lacerated liver, extensive bleeding under her scalp, and a neck injury suggesting possible strangulation. An autopsy also revealed signs of sexual assault, adding another layer of horror to the crime. Jessica, though present for much of the ordeal, later claimed she was paralyzed by fear and Blaine's control. She admitted to hearing Amora's horrible cries and seeing her daughter's abused face in a photo Blaine showed her, with one eye warped down from the trauma. Yet she did nothing to stop it. At one point, Blaine claimed Amora ran out of the room, an impossible feat for a toddler who couldn't walk, before he dragged her back to continue the assault. Blood traces found in multiple rooms showed Amora was moved around the trailer during her torment, which lasted up to 30 hours, according to prosecutors. Every cry, every wound, was a plea for mercy that went unanswered. How could a mother stand by as her child suffered? The question would haunt the courtroom. By the time the exorcism ended, Amora was dead. Her tiny body, battered beyond recognition, lay lifeless in the trailer. The medical examiner, Dr. Keith Pinkard, called it the worst case of child abuse he'd ever seen, with injuries so severe they left jurors in tears during Blaine's trial. Amora's life, full of promise, was snuffed out in a ritual born of delusion and cruelty. After Amora's death, Blaine and Jessica didn't call for help immediately. Instead, they crafted a web of lies to cover their tracks. They drove to a pawn shop in Henderson, claiming they needed money to hire a priest for another exorcism, though investigators later determined Amora was already dead by then. They pawned household tools, but instead of seeking a priest, they used some of the money to buy cigarettes, a chilling detail that underscored their detachment. The horrific crime that ended 13-month-old Amora Blaine Carson's life came to light on December 2nd, 2008, when Blaine Keith Milam, then 18, made a frantic 911 call at 10:37 a.m. from his trailer in Tatum, Rusk County, Texas. "My name is Blaine Milam, and my daughter, I just found her dead," he told the dispatcher, claiming Amora was his fiancée Jessica Carson's daughter from another relationship. When Rusk County Patrol Sergeant Kevin Roy arrived 20 minutes later, he found a grim scene. Amora's tiny body lay lifeless on the master bedroom floor, covered in bruises and bite marks, already stiff with rigor mortis. EMTs stood frozen in the doorway, and Blaine and Jessica knelt beside the child, their story unraveling from the start. How did a toddler end up so brutally beaten in their care? The investigation would uncover a chilling truth. Investigators, led by Sergeant Amber Rogers, quickly saw through the couple's initial claims. Blaine and Jessica said they'd left Amora alone in the trailer to visit a pawn shop in Henderson and returned to find her dead, suggesting someone had broken in. But there were no signs of forced entry, and the trailer's condition, cluttered, with blood traces in multiple rooms, pointed to violence inside. Forensic evidence was damning. Dr. Robert Williams, a forensic odontologist, analyzed the bite marks on Amora's body, comparing them to dental impressions from Blaine, Jessica, and Blaine's brother, Danny Milam. 8 marks matched Blaine's jagged teeth to a reasonable degree of dental certainty, while Jessica was excluded from all but 1, and Danny from all. A pipe wrench, believed to be a weapon, was found hidden under the trailer in a plastic bag after Blaine's sister, Teresa, told their aunt he'd asked her to retrieve evidence from the property. Sergeant Rogers recovered it via a search warrant, and forensic analysis found Astroglide lubricant on the wrench, Amora's diaper, and wipes in the trailer, suggesting its use in the assault. Blood traces in the bathroom and other rooms confirmed Amora was moved during her ordeal, contradicting Blaine's claim she was found in a hole in the bathroom floor. Blaine's prior criminal history strengthened the case. In September 2008, he'd been registered as a sex offender in Longview, Texas, after being sentenced for soliciting aggravated sexual assault of a child under 14. Another incident involved him sending obscene images to an 11-year-old via cell phone. When he moved to Rusk County, he failed to update his address, a state jail felony, which authorities discovered during the investigation. This history painted Blaine as a predator with a pattern of targeting vulnerable children, making his involvement in Amora's death less surprising to prosecutors. His probation status for these earlier crimes added weight to the case, showing he was already under scrutiny when he committed the murder. Would his past follow him into the courtroom? Blaine's initial alibi was a desperate patchwork of lies. He told police he and Jessica left Amora asleep in the trailer to pawn items in Henderson, returning to find her dead. He suggested a break-in, then claimed Amora had been in a car accident the previous day, or that dogs bit her, or even that she hit herself with a hammer, an impossible feat for a toddler who couldn't walk. Jessica, questioned separately by Texas Ranger Kenny Ray, admitted they'd fabricated these stories. She confessed to being present during an exorcism Blaine performed, believing Amora was possessed by demons. Blaine's claim of finding Amora dead fell apart against the forensic evidence. The bite marks, the pipe wrench, and the timeline of rigor mortis showed she'd been dead for hours before the 911 call. His lies couldn't hide the truth. Blaine's trial began in May 2010 in Montgomery County and was moved from Rusk County due to pre-trial publicity. Prosecutors, led by Rusk County District Attorney Michael Jimerson and Assistant Attorney General Lisa Tanner, painted Blaine as a monster who tortured Amora during a delusional exorcism. They presented the bite mark evidence, the pipe wrench, and testimony from Dr. Pinkard, who described Amora's injuries as the worst he'd seen in a child. Blaine's confession to a jail nurse, Shirley Broyles, in January 2009, "I'm going to confess. I did it. But the Blaine you know did not do this," was a bombshell, though he claimed his dad told him to be a man. His defense argued he was intellectually disabled and under the influence, incapable of forming intent. They also claimed Jessica's psychotic depression played a larger role, citing testimony from defense expert Dr. Mark Cunningham. But the prosecution countered with Dr. Tim Proctor, who noted Blaine's refusal to discuss the crime's details, undermining his defense. Would the jury buy his claims of disability or delusion? The jury deliberated for 10 hours before convicting Blaine of capital murder on May 17, 2010. During the punishment phase, they considered whether he was a continuing threat to society and rejected his intellectual disability claim, finding no mitigating factors. After another 8 hours, on May 27, 2010, they unanimously sentenced him to death by lethal injection. As Blaine left the courtroom, Amora's grandfather, Richard Mutina, delivered a heart-wrenching victim impact statement, speaking for his family and the toddler who'd suffered so much. Blaine's mother and sister sobbed, but the jury's verdict was clear. Justice for Amora demanded the ultimate penalty. At 20 years old, he stepped into one of the nation's most notorious death rows, a place known for its stark, isolating conditions. The Polunsky unit houses male death row inmates in 8 by 12-foot cells, where they spend 23 hours a day in solitary confinement, with 1 hour for recreation in a caged area. Concrete walls, a small window, and a steel door define Blaine's world for over 15 years. Blaine's behavior on death row was a mix of compliance and emotional struggle. According to prison records, he was generally cooperative with guards, avoiding the violent outbursts seen in some inmates. He followed the rigid routine: meals through a slot, limited personal items, and constant surveillance. But the weight of his crime and sentence bore down on him. In a first-hand account shared by the Catholic Mobilizing Network, Blaine described the mental toll of death row, writing about his struggles with suicidal thoughts, a continuation of the attempts he made after his father's death as a teen. Blaine's daily life revolved around small routines to cope with isolation. Inmates on death row are allowed books, writing materials, and sometimes a radio. Blaine, who read at an 8th grade level due to his limited education, spent time reading and writing letters, according to advocacy groups like the ARC. He reportedly found some solace in religion, engaging with prison chaplains, though specific details about his spiritual journey are scarce. Was he seeking redemption, or was faith a way to pass the endless days? His interactions with others were limited but telling. Guards described him as quiet, rarely causing trouble, which aligned with his cooperative demeanor during his arrest. He had little contact with other inmates due to the solitary nature of death row, but he maintained ties with his family, particularly his mother and sister, who visited when possible. In one instance, he asked his sister, Teresa, to retrieve a hidden pipe wrench from his trailer, a move that implicated him further in Amora's death. His letters and statements often focused on his intellectual disability claim, suggesting he saw himself as a victim of circumstance. Yet, his refusal to discuss the crime's details with psychologists during evaluations raised doubts about his remorse. Was he hiding from his actions, or incapable of fully understanding them? Amora Carson's murder left a scar on Rusk County and beyond. The community, already small and close-knit, was rocked by the horror of a child tortured under the guise of an exorcism. Local media coverage was so intense that Blaine's trial was moved to Montgomery County to ensure a fair jury. The crime fueled debates about child protection, mental health, and the dangers of drug-fueled delusions, as Blaine and Jessica's methamphetamine use played a role in their paranoia. The impact extended to Amora's mother, Jessica Carson, who was sentenced to life without parole for her role in the murder. Her failure to protect her daughter, despite hearing Amora's cries, left a lingering question: how could a mother stand by? The case also sparked broader discussions about the death penalty, especially for defendants like Blaine, whose intellectual disability claims raised ethical concerns. Advocacy groups like the ARC argued that executing someone with potential intellectual disability violated Supreme Court rulings, citing Blaine's limited education and emotional stunting. Yet, prosecutors countered that his actions showed calculated cruelty, pointing to his attempt to hide the pipe wrench and his shifting stories to the police. The case became a flashpoint for debates over justice, disability, and the reliability of forensic science. Blaine's scheduled execution on September 25, 2025, looms as a final chapter. His stays in 2019 and 2021 gave hope to his supporters, who continued to petition Governor Greg Abbott and the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles for clemency, arguing that his intellectual disability makes execution unconstitutional. But for Amora's family and the Rusk County community, the execution represents long-delayed justice for a child whose suffering shocked the conscience. The date carries a heavy weight. If carried out, it will mark Texas's commitment to its aggressive execution schedule, even as other states move away from the death penalty. Will Blaine's claims of disability halt the needle, or will Amora's memory demand the ultimate price? Blaine Keith Milam's life on death row reflects a man caught between denial, disability claims, and the unyielding reality of his crime. His scheduled execution on September 25, 2025, forces us to confront the balance between justice for a horrific act and the complexities of punishing someone with potential intellectual limitations. Amora's brutal death demands accountability, but does executing Blaine truly serve justice? Or does it raise deeper questions about how we handle mental disability in the legal system? What do you think? Does this case show the death penalty working as intended, or does it expose flaws in how we judge guilt and punishment?